Think of Jeep and you probably think of big SUVs traversing the American wilderness, but here in the UK things are slightly different. In fact, this brand has done really well with its smaller vehicles that do well for families. Now, things are taking an electric turn with the new Avenger. It's a brand new EV and it starts a whole new offensive for Jeep in that electric vehicle direction. It's got some cool off-road ready functions and some clever tech inside, and we've been given a sneak peek to check out just what it has to offer when it goes on sale later this year. So let's dive in and just find out what it has to offer. One of the Jeep cars that you might be familiar with in the UK is the Renegade. Now, the Avenger is ever so slightly smaller than that car, even though you might not think it by its chunky styling. And elsewhere, we've got some really cool off-road inspired features like this chunky black plastic cladding, which follows all the way around the car and protects it, not only if you're just going off-road or if you're taking it off a dusty trail, but also with big curbs and the usual sort of things that we all encounter during urban driving. And it means that they're going to be cheaper to replace than they would be if you got dented into a metal panel. Moving along, we've got some nice badging down the side, and that protection continues along the length of the car. Up top, there's a nice contrast roof, which helps the car look like a little bit taller, really. It's quite a clever move. And down the side, we've got one of those Easter eggs which are dotted around the Avenger, and it's a reference to the original grille of the Willys Jeep. And that's something that we find throughout this car. I'm not going to take away the excitement of finding them yourself if you want to go and find an Avenger when it comes out, but there are quite a few little Easter eggs dotted throughout this vehicle. The Avenger sits on a similar platform that you'll find underneath cars like the Mach-E, but it's been extensively remodeled to be a little bit more practical perhaps. And in fact up here it's really impressive how much space they managed to pack in. So there's 34 litres of storage space dotted throughout the forward part of the cabin. So we've got a really deep cubby here, another one down here, some nice deep door bins too. And I think that's going to be really useful for families and actually makes this car stand out against the crowd. I really like this section here, which is going to be great for putting loose items like popping your phone up, or even your tickets for when you get your parking. You can pop that there when you're all done with them and you want to keep hold of them for later. Also, we've got a nice multi-function steering wheel, some nice chunky buttons down here for the heating and ventilation controls, and some shortcuts here for the infotainment system, which I think will be really useful, particularly when you're on the move. Overall, I like the finish. It feels rugged and robust and just what you kind of expect from Jeep, but with some really useful practicality features which are going to be very good for families who want to keep this cabin as clutter-free as possible. The Avenger is obviously designed to be something of a family car, so you're wanting a decent amount of space from the back seats. Now, this driver's seat is in my position. I'm about 5'11", and I have got a relatively good amount of knee room. Foot space is really, really good, and headroom is actually pretty impressive too. So I'd say at a push, adults are going to be comfy back here. You've got ISOFIX points for 2 of the outer seats, so you are going to be able to fit child seats here. Though the one caveat to that is that I would say that the door aperture is quite small, so actually getting the child seat in the first place might prove to be a bit of a struggle. Connectivity wise, we've got one USB-C charger in the middle of the cabin, and that's about it in terms of charging, so you are going to have to fight a fight as to who charges up their device. The seat material themselves is a cloth finish, but with some nice contrast colours on the back. And I think it's going to be pretty hard wearing, and the same goes for the plastics on the side, which are a little bit rough and ready, but again, they're going to prove really resilient to family duties. The one thing I will say is that there is quite a large tunnel in the middle, so the person sitting in the middle is going to find legs are going to have to go either side. They're going to feel a little bit squashed, which seems strange given that this is an electric car and there is technically no transmission running through the middle. So I would have liked to have seen that to be a little bit flatter. However, that said, in overall terms, I think it does quite well for space and for ISOFIX points. At the rear of the Avenger, there's another one of those nice little Easter eggs, and it's the cross-shaped rear lights, which reference the petrol cans that you would have found on the Willys Jeep, and it's another nice little reference to the brand's history. But most importantly, how big is the boot? Well, back here, we have got 341 litres of space, which is around 10 litres down on the boot that you'd find in a Nissan Juke hybrid. But the space itself is nice and square, it's easy to access, and it's got this dual level area, so you can put your charging cables underneath. The only problem that I found with that in the past is that when you've got the boot fully loaded and you want to get access to your cables, you have to take everything out to get the cables back out again. But it's one small niggle, but that's not unique to the Avenger. It's pretty much across the board for these small compact EVs. It's also got a powered boot. You can access it by doing the sensor underneath the floor, which sometimes works but sometimes doesn't. And overall, I think it's quite a useful area, and it can of course be extended by lowering down the rear seats.
Underneath, the Renegade uses a 54 kilowatt hour battery, and Jeep says that that's enough to deliver up to 249 miles of range per full charge. And when it comes to charging, the Renegade can take up to 100 kilowatts of charging speed, which would give a 20 to 80% charge in around 24 minutes. Hook it up to an 11 kilowatt home wall box, and a full charge will take around 5.5 hours. Now, Jeep has also included its Select Terrain system, which helps when you're dealing with off-road or slippery surfaces. It gives you different modes to choose from and tailors the way that the power is delivered to the wheels. Also, the battery is located under the front and rear seats to help with weight distribution. In other markets, the Renegade will actually be offered with a small petrol engine, and that's why it still gets a transmission channel despite being an electric vehicle in the UK.
The new Jeep Avenger represents a really exciting, fresh addition to the EV segment. It's one that we all know is getting really hotly contested. I like the fact that Jeep has managed to include some of its rugged features like the underbody protection and the Select Terrain off-road system to make sure that this car can go a little bit further than you might expect a traditional EV to go. Inside, it's got some really cool tech, some excellent spaciousness, and it's that practicality that I think is going to really shine through to families. The rear seat space might be a little bit tight, but the addition of really decent ISOFIX points means that families are going to be able to use this as their everyday car. Throw in a really good range, and this is looking like a really interesting EV. The proof is of course in the driving, but we'll have to wait until a little bit later to find that out. But for now, things are looking pretty good. But let us know what you think. Would you drive a Jeep Avenger? Would you use it as your everyday car? Give us a comment in the section box below, and leave us a like if you have enjoyed this video. And since you're here, please remember to subscribe to the Motors.co.uk YouTube channel and hit the bell icon so you're notified every time we upload a new video.